We have an amazing panel coming up next, our plenary session. Could I ask Claudia Balducci, Alexis Mercedes Rinck, and Representative Greg Nance to join us at the front? Anyone know? Thank you for setting us up for this session. So joining us at the front is Claudia Balducci, Chair of the King County Council, representing, what's that? Past chair. Oh. Well, thank you for correcting me. I appreciate that. No, that's good. Greg Nance is the Washington State Representative for Kitsap, and Alexis Mercedes Rinck is member of the Seattle City Council. Thank you all for joining us. We know that you are advocates for transit for non-drivers, and today we're trying to ask some really vexing questions that I don't think much of anyone really has good answers for, so we're not anticipating that you'll necessarily land us with any answers. But the purpose of this session is really to try to understand better how do our ideas, ideologies, and values around non-drivers become policy, and how can we as practitioners, planners, university researchers, advocates, community members, organizations, how can we promote and support the pathway to acceptance, sustainability, and stewardship? So, should we go one round first? If you want to introduce yourself, talk a little bit more about where your starting point is and kind of the background that you're bringing into the conversation. And I'll start with Claudia.
Morning. Excellent. Good morning. Thank you so much. My name is Claudia Balducci. I serve on the King County Council. I represent East King County, Bellevue, Kirkland, Redmond, Mercer Island area. I'm a former mayor and council member from the city of Bellevue. But my journey to being a transportation advocate, policymaker, started in my childhood because I grew up in and around New York City. And when I moved here to the Northwest, finding that I didn't have a car, I lived in Bellevue. Imagine what that experience was like. I lasted about a year and then gave in. But so as I've worked through my profession, I've always advocated for more expanded, better transit because just in my view, that is a better way of life and it's more accessible and inclusive. In my later years, just about the time I was turning 50, I decided to start becoming a bicycle commuter just for health and exercise and mental health. That will teach you a lot about how our system works and doesn't work. And I've served on the Sound Transit Board fighting to expand light rail. I'm also the chair of our King County Transportation District, which is our transportation benefit district, where we are just now talking about raising money for increased rural roads and transit service. So I do a lot of stuff in this area. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Good morning, everybody. It's a real honor to be invited and be a part of this panel, especially with these two folks. You both are amazing, so I'm just really honored to be up here and a part of this panel. My name is Alexis Mercedes Rinck. I sit on the Seattle City Council, and I am one of the at-large representatives, so I actually represent the entire city. So if you live in the city of Seattle, I'm one of your representatives on our city council. And I have not owned a car for 6 years now. I've been living car-free in the city, and I know I represent about the 20% of Seattle households that now are also car-free. Notably, when we look at population trends in Seattle, recent analysis showed that across the past 5 years, despite a big population boom, we haven't seen a commensurate boom in car ownership, which there's some lessons to be learned there, which I'm excited to get to in our session. But in terms of my work on Seattle City Council, I'm the vice chair of our transportation committee, and I'm also a member of some of our regional committees where we're taking up these regional discussions on transit and mobility. So a member of the Regional Transit Committee with King County Council members, and also on the Puget Sound Regional Council Transportation Policy Board. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Wonder if this is on. Yeah, go. Good morning, everybody. I am so delighted to be here. My name is Greg Nance. I'll start with a confession. I feel really bad. I'm the only one up here that drove to the conference today. Yeah, I'm here in the booze already. I'm really grateful to be up here because I think this is really where change begins, when we actually get together. Part of my message today will be about strength in numbers. Too often, our voices as transportation advocates aren't around the table all the time, and that's why I was so delighted to say yes to be here, because I want to connect, share a few things I'm learning as a legislator, working on transportation issues in the Capitol, and then I also want to hear from you about what's working in your neck of the woods, because we're going to be a lot stronger together. I come to this work a little bit by accident. I'm a nonprofit executive, really passionate about youth mental health. How do we get young people better connected? And for me, my own story, I dealt with some tough stuff as a teenager with depression and substance abuse. And the one thing that really helped me was actually movement and actually getting out. And so I loved running. I played every sport, wasn't very good at any of them, but I was pretty quick. And so I followed that as a runner. And then getting out on our roadways and on our trails, realized what a gift it is to have connected communities and safe streets and sidewalks and trails that take you places. I'm on a mission to let's build a lot more of that. Let's do it safely, and look forward to getting your advice and your counsel for how we can do that in your neck of the woods, because it's going to take all of us working together to do it. Really delighted to be here today. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to jump right into it. When we talk about access here, let's just contextualize a little bit. We're going to talk about non-drivers' ability to reach places. And that can take a whole host of different shapes and forms. It's people getting to places using devices. It's people having access to transit or frequent transit so that they're able to access the services they need. It's basically different types of subpopulations that are all agglomerated under this. And I guess my question is, at least to start off, to ground us, when access actually begins to matter, how does it look in public decision making? When are those considerations and subpopulations, Alexis mentioned 20%. When does that 20% begin to be included in the conversation on policymaking? Anybody? We can go in the same order. If
Sure, yeah. I think I would love to be able to say that it matters because your leaders and policymakers care about doing the right thing and serving everyone, but that's not where it really starts. It really starts with a law, a problem that happened and somebody passed a law and now we have to. You need a forcing function of some kind, and like the ADA was a forcing function. Prior to the ADA, no matter what the good intentions were, we didn't have the kind of access to the transportation system that you see today, and that's because there's a law that has evolved over time. Regulations come into play, enforcement comes into play, lawsuits happen, and so that is all very important. And I wish I could say we all do it out of the goodness of our hearts, but collectively it takes a lot of pressure. So I think that we need to maintain the focus on passing good laws, and that doesn't just mean at the state and federal level. At the local level, we need to pass good ordinances that apply to our own jurisdictions that force us to then do the right thing and send the message to the entire organization. So at King County, I passed, I think it was a budget proviso that said to the county, we need to do better on roadway safety, which to me is a very important access issue. Like, nobody's going to want to walk on your sidewalks if they're afraid of getting hit by cars, right? So, and we have got at King County public health, a big road section, over 1,500 miles of county roads, regional transit, and a number of other functions that make us sort of an ideal hub for really good thinking around what does traffic safety and access look like? What does transportation safety and access look like? The pushback, you all, the pushback, that's not really our job. Like, well, then whose job is it? And so I think that what we can do as elected officials and policymakers is we can force the issue by passing broad, inclusive policies and rules, basically, that say, now we must do better. And then you have to apply the continuous improvement, right? You can't just say, like, even if I pass an ordinance that said, we're going to have better signage, we're going to have more accessible signage on our light rail. So for example, we're having a debate right now about the signage on the light rail. It's not as good as it could be, and a lot more people are riding it, so we're learning it's not as good as it could be. There's no move to change that until and unless the board pushes it. And then when we do, then we have to go back and check 6 months later, a year later, how did you do? Because it doesn't happen automatically by itself. So I think that's where it starts. And by the way, what motivates us to act is you all, is hearing from people, hearing your experiences, getting us out and seeing what is going on and how the system works and doesn't work for people of all types, as you said. So I know you're going to hear from Anna Zevarts later, but the whole idea of the week without driving was so brilliant because it got a bunch of able-bodied legislators out to see how the system works and doesn't work when you can't drive, and that's very eye-opening and forces us to go back and then pass those rules and policies that drive change.
Certainly. So understanding when access really becomes part at the table and comes into the equation when we're working on policy, I think a lot about visibility and who's bringing visibility to that perspective. And sometimes that can come from your elected representatives. So I know the three of us up here, we center our lived experience in a lot of the committee discussions we may be having. So I think about the ways in which I've seen my own colleagues raise the issues. I mentioned in my intro, I represent the 20% of Seattle households that also are car-free. I think my colleagues are probably sick of hearing me say that. They're like, we get it, you don't have a car. And I'm like, but I want to put it in the dialogue. So we remember that it's 1 out of 5 households we're talking about who are relying on us to deliver a safe and accessible transit system. Safe streets, frequent and reliable bus access, a great bike network, all of those things. And so there's visibility to an issue that can come from elected officials. I know a few of my colleagues have also centered their own really unfortunate experiences they've had on their roadways. So Councilmember Strauss has talked about the crash he got into when he was on his bike. I myself have almost been hit 3 separate times walking down Rainier Avenue. Councilmember Foster has talked about the unfortunate collision she's also had. Bringing those experiences up in policy discussions really makes it real, especially in what can feel like abstract policy space. But even looking at the ways in which we show up as policymakers to the work. These two, again, this is why I'm so excited to be on a panel on these folks. When I first started policy work, I saw Councilmember Balducci rolling up to meetings in full bike attire. That makes a difference, and not just once, like multiple times. To see someone, even just a policymaker, show up and model that makes a world of a difference when you're rolling into a meeting.
I feel like I have to confess I drove here today, just didn't bag. Sorry.
We love an honest politician.
When the light rail goes across the bridge, it'll be a different story. Let's do it again.
Just a few weeks away. But point being, it changes the tenor of a conversation when you have a council member rolling into a meeting and she still has her helmet on. You know, and these things matter. And similarly, I know the first time I met with Representative Nance, you came over on the ferry. And we were chatting about that and the importance of having those waterways. And I know I roll into council meetings taking the bus. So this is one part where who you have at these tables really matters. So I have to mention the electoral piece. And I'm a firm believer that, you know, no one person knows everything, but together we know a lot. And this is where our advocates come in. Because we know that there are so many perspectives that are not at the table. And this is where it is incumbent upon advocates to be involved, and it's incumbent upon elected officials to really create that connective tissue between the advocacy world and the legislation that we're working on. It's crucial because too often I know in City Hall, the voices that we hear sometimes most regularly are voices of the status quo. And we are here in this room working towards real systems change, fundamentally changing the built environment of our neighborhoods. And that is uncomfortable for a lot of folks who benefit from the way things are. And so it really does become like we need advocates at the table in the meetings, raising these things up and bringing visibility to the perspectives that you all bring.
Beautifully said and so thoughtful on both fronts. Working at the state level, we're going to have, I wonder if I'm on. Is this? No, okay. Maybe now. I'll trade you. How's that? Working at the state level, we have almost 2,000 bills filed under proposal. We're working on a state budget that will be a couple thousand pages long. And what you quickly realize is like all of our eyes kind of glaze over at all of the spreadsheets, all of these numbers. And it really has anchored me in the power of stories and the power of real human connection and human experiences. And I'll give you an example of this. One of the most important transportation priorities in our neck of the woods is called the Warren Avenue Bridge, and it connects Bremerton to the rest of the peninsula. And as a high school baseball player years ago, I remember walking across this bridge, and you basically took your life into your hands doing so. It was not a safe experience, and that bridge is now 20 years older. It really, really needs a makeover. And as we got to kind of version 1 of what that would look like, it was really apparent that's still not designed for pedestrians or cyclists the way it could or should be. And one individual, really above all, helped to anchor that discussion, helped to bring folks around the table. And so it was less of a threshold of people. It was really one person that said, look, this is not acceptable. We've got to do better. Her name, Diane Iverson, and she is an amazing transportation advocate. Maybe some of y'all have met through Leafline or Cascade. As a double amputee and retired school teacher, knows the power of organizing. And she has demanded we can't settle for a 6-foot bike lane here that would put her husband, others in peril. We've got to do better. And over the years, she's been able to put together a coalition of folks in our community to demand the right solution. And it's been pretty impressive seeing her organize around this. And in our most recent state budget, we're able to get the dollars to actually build the bridge the right way. Not only so Diane and her family can enjoy that, but for generations. A lot of the work that we do, all collectively, this is 50, 7,500 year infrastructure. We got to get it right for generations that we'll never meet, but we'll rely on that. And sometimes one person just demanding, this is not acceptable, we got to get it right, is exactly how we do that.
Very good. Well said. I'll riff off of the 2 things that you just mentioned. So I think obviously it's really important to have representation at the table. Those stories are the most poignant. Having those councils outside that support those decisions is obviously the next best thing. What types of story artifacts, evidential artifacts, would be supportive for folks who are not at the representatives' tables? How can we best support you, either through research, data, or through storytelling, or the combination of both, because they're really important, to move these kinds of initiatives forward?
I'll try to lead
Different
off
order,
here.
changing it up.
So sometimes we wait for the big, here's the big public meeting, and then they're shouting on 2 sides. A lot of engagement at that stage feels a little, I think it's important, but it can also feel a little too late. So this earlier we're upstream working with folks when the cortisol is a lot lower, when we're actually open to a lot of different alternates and prospective solutions, that's where I think we can actually make the biggest mark. At that stage as well, you plant seeds, and seeds take a little bit of time, right? And so when we plant those seeds upstream, we do it in the right kind of environments, really powerful things can happen. And so I'm thinking about modalities like there's a town hall that we're all trying to be accessible. I know that about all 3 of us, whether that's at a town hall or a coffee hours or just walking around or out on our bikes or at a conference. Plant the seed, and the sooner it is before a decision's got to be made or a funding package has to be set, that actually can be more powerful. Especially because then you can bring along your friends during the next milestones of our public processes. And so the sooner upstream is kind of point number 1. That's really, really helpful because we all have open minds. We want to learn from you. We want to think about what's actually possible, what can fit within a proposed budget. The sooner we have that data and the sooner we hear from you, I think the better off it'll be. Additionally, at that public hearing or that public meeting, sometimes the right story in that moment absolutely can move a needle. The reason why I'm probably overdressed here, I've got my big bill this session is heading to the Senate Transportation Committee this afternoon. Yeah, thank you. And And I'll blather more about that later, but our star testifier, we have 37 folks going to testify about why we need more passenger ferry access. And I think the person who's going to really just do a wonderful job sharing this is someone that lives her life in a wheelchair and is an incredible advocate for why we need more ways to get around. And the passion that she brings, her lived experiences of the system as it is failing her, and it's failing a lot of neighbors like her. We got to do better. That sometimes can really jolt someone where they're in a lot of public policy spaces, there's a lot of inertia, there's a lot of lethargy, there's a lot of, this problem will get fixed, just wait till 2035. And when when we, as a community in Kitsap, we count on ferries, it's like, that's just not tenable when neighbors are missing chemotherapy and missing work and school and flights, missing payroll in their small business. We got to do better, and we got to do better faster. The right story sometimes is that real spark that we need. So start upstream and also think about, in those critical moments, what's the core narrative that can really reframe a conversation.
So well said, and so excited for mosquito fleets. So fingers crossed. That was an amazing answer on narrative. I'm going to drill in on one point that you raised, which is around the spark. And I'm going to talk about a spark, or as I like to call it, a policy window. Finding the timing where you can bring attention to an issue. And I think too often in the transportation space, in the transit space, oftentimes a policy window comes with tragedy. But I want to tell a story about where we found a policy window that didn't involve tragedy, but one where we were able to take advantage of a moment and catalyze into a larger effort. We had a situation a couple months ago where one morning I woke up to a headline saying that there was going to be an effort to rip out a bus-only lane and take away a bus stop. Right in the heart of Capitol Hill, one of our densest, most walkable neighborhoods that has a ton of transit access. And I thought, that's weird. Why would we do that? That doesn't seem to make any sense. And anyone who knows Capitol Hill knows that is like the urbanist hub. So understandably, people were really upset and confused as to why we'd be taking out a bus stop that also was wearing the little hood of shame. It wasn't an open bus stop yet, but it was sitting there pristine, ready to go, and no one quite knew why it wasn't open yet, and now we were hearing that it was going to be ripped up that Saturday. So I have to give credit where credit's due, because I know we have folks in the room from Transit Riders Union. I know Transit Riders Union mobilized people to start bringing attention to this. We had folks with Seattle Neighborhood Greenways raising it up. So communities talking about it. And that gave me the wind under my wings to be able to go to SDOT and call the mayor's office and say, what are we doing? What's happening here? Help me understand what's going on here. We need an answer immediately. But taking advantage of that moment to use a bit of the power of social media and create some visibility to the issue, to say, hi, everybody. This is going to come down for some reason. I'm working on trying to find answers. But here's what I know at this time. That further work to build some more momentum. I'll make a long story short and say that bus stop did not go down. The road was not torn up. And that bus stop finally opened. And it just took a little bit of visibility to make that happen. That was one instance, and immediately, like circling up with the advocates, we said, we can't let this moment die down. We just won. So what else do we want? How do we take advantage of this moment and talk about the importance of our rapid ride investments and why that bus stop mattered? Because it wasn't just that. It wasn't about that bus stop. It was about how do we keep the ball rolling on improving bus access and reliability. And so from that point, about a week later, we launched what we call our Better Bus Lanes campaign. And that Better Bus Lanes campaign is focused on 3 major roadways in the city of Seattle that experience all kinds of congestion and issues around reliability and frequency. And that includes Aurora Avenue, Denny Way, and Rainier Ave South, and 3 primary bus lines that are some of the busiest bus lines in our state. But because of just the design of those roadways, those buses can get caught up in traffic, lead to delays, and we can't deliver on that reliability that people expect of us. We know that folks take the bus and choose to hop on the bus if it's easy and convenient and it gets them where they need to go reliably and in a timely way. And part of the city's role in our work with King County, King County runs the buses, but we're in charge of the roads. And so from a road design standpoint, those bus-only lanes matter because the Route 8 or as we call it, the late, gets caught on Denny way often and is sitting in traffic full of folks. And that's a busy bus in many ways. A lot of people rely on it, and it's unfair to the folks who rely on the 8 to commute if they're sitting in traffic. So we use that moment around a small victory to stand up a bus stop to launch into something bigger. And I'll close by saying, of course, elections matter, and it's amazing that we have a mayor that is so transit focused. But I think it's notable that one of her first executive orders was to put a bus lane, extend a bus lane on Denny Way to help deliver on that Better Bus Lanes campaign. So this is how we build momentum. You find your right policy window and you take advantage of it. Thank you.
Yeah. By the way, it takes a lot of courage to do. I mean, Alexis makes it sound like fun and easy to do what she does, but there's a lot of pushback on the sorts of things she's talking about, and a lot of opposition because people don't see the benefit and they see impacts. I can't drive as easily on this road if you do, if you have a bus lane, so thank you. I mean, this makes for great partners with our transit system. Appreciate it. So to answer your question, I want to sort of briefly talk about 3 ways that I have had people come into my space on strictly mobility issues and ways that they brought stories and advocacy that made a difference in 3 different ways. All 3 happen to involve people who are wheelchair users. The first one was just a constituent of mine. Showed up at my office one day with a friend. She lives on Mercer Island. She's a doctor who has lost the movement in her legs over time due to a degenerative condition. And and each one of these was an eye-opening moment for me, a thing that I would not have realized despite all my work in transportation if somebody didn't bring it to me. So this person said, you know, you've cut back, Metro, on the service around Mercer Island because it's low ridership. True. Low ridership routes get, when we don't have money, they are top of the list to be cut. And because she is, this particular rider, constituent, is very independent and very mobile, she doesn't like to use access buses. Access is the, dial a ride, because you qualify, because you have a disability. They take a long time. You have to order way ahead. It limits your spontaneity in life. I want to go see a friend tonight. That's not going to happen if you didn't order the bus yesterday, right? Also, going to some kind of an event, you might arrive late, you might have to leave early in order to get your ride. It's not very convenient. And she's able to and wants to ride a regular scheduled bus. And we had cut that bus for ridership reasons, but it created a desert for anybody who relied on transit on Mercer Island. And we don't think about Mercer Island as being a place where people rely on transit, but there are. There are people everywhere. So I advocated to get the bus route reinstated. It's not super frequent, but it enabled her to get on with her life and other people as well. So that was individual, just came to me with an issue I had never heard of before, not on any kind of cycle. She just came and said, I have a problem. You're my council member. Help me. That's a thing you can do. The second one is sort of more institutionalized. We have got at all of our governments advocate or advisory committees that we set up. A lot of advisory committees around with people with lived experience who we rely on continuously to advise us on these issues. And I had a father of a severely disabled young adult woman come to see me from our disability advisory committee. And he told a story, again, something I had no idea. We run the paratransit for King County. It's called the Access Buses. And what we didn't realize was our contract with the outside contract provider who does this service for King County, that's another policy problem that we need to work on. But this outside contract provider, Laura, I know you know, was incentivized to always have somebody sitting on the bus. If they had an empty bus, somehow this was disadvantageous. They didn't make as much money. So what they were doing with this nonverbal adult rider was it was their last run of the day. They would take her all the way as far as they could towards the base before dropping her off. So she sat sometimes for over an hour on a ride that should have just taken a few minutes and was not able to communicate this problem to anybody because she's nonverbal. But her father started to realize she was not coming home timely. So he came as part of this, institutionalized advocacy group and said, you have got to do better. And that caused us to take the lid off of the access bus and find a number of problems, which we are still working on solving. But that kind of advocacy identified a service issue. We have one of the best access services in the country. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. So that's another way things come to us. And then there's these kind of like fun advocacy things that or interesting. I'm in favor of a lot of the proclamations and celebratory things that we do. I know a lot of people think they're a waste of time, but if you once a year, every year, do a proclamation on access to mobility or on the week without driving, or it keeps it at the front of our minds in a way that we're not actually having the fight at that moment. We're just being reminded that this is an issue. And we get to bring people into the chambers that tell their stories. And the third story that I want to share is one of the advocates from the Week Without Driving, it will stick with me for the rest of my life, told a story about living in an area with no sidewalk. And because of the cost of living in the Seattle area, she doesn't have a lot of options to move someplace. So she has to get her wheelchair out into the traffic lane that is not well maintained because it's an unincorporated area. Sorry, roads, we're going to fund them. And it's not well cleaned, so she's going over gravel in traffic, sometimes in the dark, sometimes in the rain, to finally get to a bus stop where she can get a bus. So this story came to us because of an organized group that is actively advocating. So individual constituents getting involved with standing committees and advisory groups, and then sort of being involved with groups or starting one yourself that is creating some kind of an advocacy moment. So, TikTok is great for this, like things that sort of catch the attention and the imagination of the policy. And these are all ways that you can get your story told and get our attention and get us to do something.
These are great. Thank you so much. In fact, I think everything up to the very last point was like, you got to show up, but we're talking about exactly the people who have a hard time showing up for a number of reasons, right? And so like the idea of using social media and mobilizing through that is really helpful. Now, I didn't hear any suggestions regarding like numbers, data.
Data is super important, and so we're all skipping over the data, but data is like, I think data points are very important, but you want to have data plus, right? Data plus stories. If you just come to us with numbers, that helps. It helps to satisfy the urge inside of every policymaker that says, is this a big problem? Is it a small problem? How much should I be putting into this? Will my colleagues vote for a lot of money? And so data is important. The number that sticks in my head again, and I'm sorry, I'm just like an advertisement for Anna here today, but the 30% of people don't drive. 30% of people in our communities don't drive was an amazing number. Too old, too young, can't drive, won't drive. And so that's a lot of people. That makes a difference to know that number, because it helps us to advocate with our colleagues that we should be investing more funding, not just in the things that make the cars go faster. At the same time, it's not enough just to have data. Also, data can be misleading, right? I think what we should be doing with our transportation systems and accessibility is trying to build a system that is, as much as we can in this imperfect world, accessible to absolutely everybody, to the 0.0001%. Because then if it's accessible to somebody who's uniquely abled, right? Then it's accessible to me and a mom with a stroller and everybody. And so the data is important because policymakers care about it when it comes to funding decisions, but we have to go beyond data because that doesn't get the job fully done.
Certainly, to build on that point, like, it's data plus, and I'm going to be spicy and say, I would love if every policymaker looked at data and cared about data, but that's not the world we live in, and I think we all know that. And so I want to kind of pivot and emphasize how important it is to understand what drives your decision maker. Because not everybody cares about the data. They care about their reelection, they care about looking good, or they care about whether or not they're embarrassed in the media. Those are tools too. That is my very spicy take. And if we're real about motivating change, thank you. If we're real about motivating change, the call is understand what motivates your policymaker. Because you can have 2 great members on a 9-person body and 2 is not a majority. And so taking time to understand the dynamics, like for a district council member, what's happening in their district, make it real for something that's in their district, for example, or something that they care about, and be able to tell that story. That's something that I would emphasize. Yes, we should all be underpinning our arguments and why we're doing things with data. And it can't be the only thing. And sometimes the thing that gets the decision maker to do the thing you need them to do is for a very silly reason or a silly rationale. But if we're about really effectuating change, that is a tool, and a realistic tool in the toolbox that I think needs to be talked about.
Really great insight here. I started my career in finance, which was a dark chapter in my personal life. And so, yeah, I found myself as a rookie legislator getting too deep into a lot of data and realizing, oh, look, I'm not actually convincing any of my colleagues right now. I learned that less is more. And so to echo what I'm hearing here, figure out what is actually going to move the needle for who you're speaking to. Later today, we have this hearing I mentioned for the Mosquito Fleet Act. 3 key numbers here that I'm really going to emphasize, because we're aiming for bipartisan legislation, and we're aiming for kind of a skeptical committee chair to build more urgency. So the 3 numbers: San Juan County, which has really taken it on the chin with our ferries going down, they've lost 30% of their small business revenue. 30%, and you can imagine the business people that are impacted, the county budget that's impacted, all the people that are impacted. Fast ferries, passenger ferries immediately quickly boost that, right, by restoring a 103-year-old route that has been paused indefinitely for the last 6 years. And so I know that will speak to the legislator that represents that district, and it will speak to a number of conservatives that may be a little skeptical about all of this. The second element, a number of our colleagues, probably at the city level, at the county level, the state level, are a little skeptical about public transit generally. And they point to, you're only getting 5% of fare box recovery. Like, this is just a bad ROI. And it's like, oh, you're so not understanding the full benefits that public transit gives to our community. But I also try to point to fare box recovery with ferries tends to do better. We're in somewhere between 40 and 110% depending on the route. And so that actually is that's a gold standard when it comes to public transit. And so just trying to speak to, look, this is a strong ROI when it comes to the world of public transit, and there's all of these benefits that we're going to speak to in a hearing as well that will hopefully open their aperture a little bit. The third element is just the brass tacks. We as a state are underwater. We've got to find smart uses of very, very limited dollars. Our first new hybrid electric ferry is going to cost over $400 million. The second and third will be in the $350 to $300 million range. One new passenger ferry can be between $6 and $10 million. And so very quickly, you're actually getting a lot of optionality, and you're actually stretching dollars a lot farther. And when I share those data points, you actually look, and a lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are starting to nod of like, oh, like that's the light bulb moment for them. So sometimes less is more, certainly understanding your audience, and the data plus piece, all very, very important. And don't be like me as like the rookie legislator just throwing out tons of data points, because eyes glaze over, pick the strongest, and then really double down there.
Amazing, thank you. So let's take it on to the next stage. Let's say we're in the room, we're in the conversation. How do we plan for sustainability and sustaining through the legislative process? Claudia spoke a little bit about where collaboration and evaluation cycles can potentially drive that kind of eye for success and sustainability. What are some of those things that we can bring in the room, demonstrate collaborations, demonstrate the motivation to work together? Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
I'm going to draw on an example related to kind of the world of housing and transit, because City Council just went through a comprehensive plan process, and oh my gosh, we have any land use folks in the room? Woo! No? Yeah, I see you, Scott. So I actually want to take a moment to really center the work of the Complete Communities Coalition on the comprehensive plan. So for those who don't know the comprehensive plan, like in the state of Washington, we have a Growth Management Act to help manage growth across our state. We have the Puget Sound Regional Council that develops MPPs, the county that works on CPPs, and then all of these respective plans need to flow down into each city passing a comprehensive plan. And the City of Seattle's comprehensive plan is like the wonkiest 1,000-page document you could imagine that is deeply consequential to how the future of our city will look, how we're going to move there, where people are going to be able to live. So we're talking about land use and zoning decisions that, for all of its abstract and wonkiness, deeply consequential, and people have big feelings about it. We're talking about trying to address and really face the music on our racist history of zoning policy here in the city and redlining. And we're talking about changing the literal built environment of many neighborhoods, which people have big feelings about when we're talking about upzoning a neighborhood or not having as much street parking, for example. People have big feelings about those kind of changes. But I want to emphasize the example of the Complete Communities Coalition, which is a broad coalition of partners. And I think it's something like, now I'm looking at Scott, who's been an amazing, Scott should probably come up here and talk about this, but a large coalition of 20 plus different organizations across the realm representing environmental justice, housing justice, folks who work in nonprofit development, a broad coalition. And I bring this up as an example for sustainability because the comprehensive plan process is long. In addition to being an abstract process that's really complicated, because land use is very complicated, so I've learned over the past year, it's also a long process. We had multiple public hearings that went for hours and hours and hours. I believe our longest public hearing was 6 hours on the comp plan. That's just one of the hearings. And that means turning out a lot of people and having a diverse body that represents and has that organizing power allows people to tap in and tap out in the various organizing things that needed to be done. So this is a body that was running happy hours and doing comment sections to, especially when there was like the written public comment period, they were driving folks out to turn out to town halls to interface directly with the Office of Planning and Community Development staff and provide input, and then mobilizing people to turn out for public comment and helping provide that guidance on like, here's around when you should show up, here's what you should consider saying, here's some of the things that we, this broad coalition, are pushing for. Having that broad coalition representing so many different areas also makes it more receptive for policymakers to hear if they feel like even if there's a part of your coalition that maybe they don't resonate with, it just increases that likelihood that there's going to be a good messenger within that coalition that can get through to that policymaker's ear. And it helps in sharing the load of organizing, because organizing work is really hard. I know I didn't talk about it in my introduction, but before becoming an elected official, before even getting my master's here at UW in policy work, I was a community organizer, organizing marches and rallies, and I was a girl with a clipboard and would ask you to sign and make this call and do all of that work. And it's exhausting, and I burnt out over and over again because the work of trying to institute social change it takes a toll when you don't take care of yourself. Now I think we're learning more about how to sustain in the work, but part of how we sustain in the work is we have strong coalitions of folks that represent different perspectives who can tap in and tap out. So I point to, again, that as a really positive example of a solid coalition and how that work can be a sustainability, a way to help sustain our movements.
Love all that. Yeah, by the way, a lot of alphabet soup, but the countywide planning policies I like to describe as the, if comprehensive planning were a board game, it's the instructions on the inside of the box top. That's what you have to do in your comprehensive plan. And I was very happy to write into our latest ones that work about undoing redlining and historic discrimination, because all the cities are working on that now. So thank you for that. Taking sustainability, the question in a slightly different direction, I'm thinking about like, how do you, okay, you got in somehow to your elected officials, you got their attention, they passed something you're very happy with. How do we make it effective so that the change that you wanted through that, whatever it is that got passed, gets made and sustained and hopefully improve over time? So I've got a few tricks, I guess I would say, that I like. I like writing into legislation deadlines and report backs. That instead of just saying, go do X, like now you will improve the frequency on the 8, you will provide better service on the access buses, and we want to report back, and we give a lot of detail about what the report should include in a year ahead of the budget. And then we hear back and we share with the advocates, or you all watch because you know in August the report is coming, and then we see how's it going. And that gives us a marker in time, not only to hear what the agency says they're doing and how it's going, but also how are the advocates experiencing the change? Are you seeing the change you wanted to see? Is it not? That gives us a next bite at, do we need to do more? And I said the B word, the budget. Every year, the budget is an opportunity to come back and look at how we're doing things. It is the main power that all us legislators have. We can pass ordinances and we can write motions and resolutions. The main power we have is to fund or not fund all of the activities of every part of the governments that we sit on. So if this is a metro problem that we're having, we can withhold money from metro. We can put they call it a proviso or an expenditure restriction. We can put a clamp on top of any amount of money. If I'm sending a message, it's $50,000. You metro will not get $50,000 until you show us that you're doing that thing we said to do. If I'm annoyed, it's $250,000. If it's a real problem, it's a few million. Or expenditure restrict the entire section. Like, you can't spend any money at all until you come back here and tell us. Like, I mean, and we do this because that is the lever that we have. Also, it brings them into the chambers and onto an agenda, and therefore into public where everybody can see what's happening. So those are like some really powerful tools that we have for accountability and sustainability of efforts. You have to sort of watch beyond the moment of, yay, I got the signature, I got the governor to sign, or I got the executive to sign, or the mayor, through, okay, now are we seeing the results we wanted to see?
Tremendous insight. I think a reason why both of y'all are so effective. Looking into your toolkit here, I love that.
I think I'm not praising you all enough. You all are awesome too.
In Kitsap, the district I'm proud to represent, we're really fortunate where we're a rural community, but actually have really excellent public transit connections within that rural community. And as you look around the state and around the country, that's not too common. And so one way that I approach the question of how do we sustain the positive impact we're making is two threads. I mentioned in the opening strength in numbers. And the second piece I'll mention is remember that we're playing a long game. And Councilmember Balducci with the B word in the budget, that is spot on. About 10 years ago, way before I got involved with politics or government, our county realized that we had a once-in-a-generation opportunity to buy really, really important piece of former timber land that was scheduled to be clear-cut. And this is like 1,000 acres. It's a beautiful wildlife habitat next to salmon streams right between our two reservations, the Port Campbell Sklallam and Suquamish, and it's right there off like the Kitsap Transit line. Like it's just a beautiful place that should be an old-growth forest. We don't want an out-of-state timber company harvesting a couple $1 million worth of timber and then exiting forever. And yet that was what was going to happen 10 years ago. I'm really fortunate. Some of our forebears stepped up, secured the funding to buy the land. And as part of this agreement, they bought all the land, but they couldn't actually raise enough money for the land plus the timber. And so part of this agreement was, look, we'll have the land, but the timber company in 10 years can come back and actually still harvest this timber. And lo and behold, who's now the representative trying to cobble together the funding for this? Me. Luckily, 10 years ago, this group did a really remarkable job rallying strength in numbers and then reminding the community, look, this is a fight. We won round one here by securing the land. We've got to come back and secure the timber. And so in this year's budget, we knew this is crunch time, this is our deadline, and many of us in the room here fought for the Climate Commitment Act and the continuation of that. I'm really, really proud that we were able to rally our community called Our Forest Fund, wrote in over 150 letters to our office. I'm old school, so I literally print these letters. I take it to our budget chair and say, look, this is a huge priority for our community to sustain these timber rights. And by strength in numbers plus playing that long game, in our House proposed budget, $773,000 to actually acquire those timber rights and to preserve this old growth forest, which has been a beautiful gathering place for many of our community members to go play and recreate and have fun on these trails. It supported small business around, and it supports Kitsap Transit as well. So strength in numbers, we got to show up, and then remember that, look, a lot of what we do, it's a 9-inning game, and too often we can win the first inning and then say our work is done, or lose the first inning and say, it's over, game over. But ultimately, it's a 9-inning game. We got to keep showing up, which is my mantra in life. Keep showing up, and when we do so, really good things happen. Hey, thank you.
I love that we had a positive ending after mentioning the stick that might have made some people in the room a little sad, because we have agencies represented here as well. So I'd like to end with one last question that you kind of sprung to the fore. Mobility investments take time, 9 innings. How do we establish trust within communities and agencies to stay that course? I know that's a big question that you might not have the answers to, but give us what your take is.
Yeah, because you framed it around how long it takes to deliver on transportation projects, it kind of made me sad for a moment, because right now at Sound Transit we are facing very, very long timelines to deliver the next round of transit investments, and so it's a question that's really top of mind. So right now things are good, right? We're opening light rail in March, yay! And we're opening, and we're groundbreaking. Thank you. Yes, I begged for that. Thank you for giving it. And we're groundbreaking on all the bus rapid transit lines that will come out of, that will come online in the next few years, 2 years, 3 years. But then there's going to be a drought, a really long drought, before we deliver new bus service or new light rail service. And how do we maintain trust with the voters on just sheer volume? And by the way, volume is an accessibility issue, because the more transit we have, frequency is freedom, right? The more, like, if you know you can show up and a bus is coming in a few minutes and you don't have to plan your whole day around it, you're going to use it. I don't have a good answer for that question. We are currently really digging into it. I think the answer probably lies somewhere in transparency and consistency of communications. I think we have to get away from the fear, to an excellent point that Councilmember Mercedes Rinck made. We are all afraid of our next reelection, right? We are all afraid of the bad headline. And so that translates into sometimes a Pollyanna-ish way of talking to the public, where everything's great. It's all good. And we talk about all the good things we're doing and all the things we've accomplished, and we're reluctant to talk about the risks and the problems and the challenges. But nobody buys it when you don't acknowledge the risks and the problems and the challenges, because we all know they exist. Like, we all know they're there. So I think being open and transparent with the public about the reasons for our problems and challenges and what we're trying to do about them is super important to maintaining community trust. And then there's something about perseverance and just never quitting, just like not giving up, like showing that we are in it for the long haul. We are going to deliver on the things we promised. We are going to be flexible. I think we really struggle in this sphere, particularly around flexibility. So we're literally building a train. The rails are straight. Everything is like straight ahead. We just don't bother us with the things on the side. We want to go straight ahead. But then people come in with, hey, what if you did this other thing differently? I talked about the signage problems, and people they don't want to bother. We've got a work plan, and that's not on it. Don't bother us with it, right? And so I think we need to learn to be more flexible, especially in these drought years, where when people come to us with issues, I will give you Sounder. People love Sounder. Sounder's a great service. It's our heavy rail service. It should run all day, and it should run more frequently. And thank you. Yes, it should. And it's very difficult because we don't own the tracks. BNSF, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, owns the tracks. And any of you, we're all probably not old enough for this, but there was an old bit on Saturday Night Live that Lily Tomlin used to do about the phone company, back when there was one phone company. And the tagline was, "We don't care. We don't have to. We're the phone company." That's BNSF, right? Like, they don't care, and they don't have to, right? So we're fighting, and the feds don't care, and so, but yet we have to fight through, right? Like, we have to show that we care about this, that we're making progress, that we're going to keep going until we lick the problem and provide. So a little bit of self-criticism goes a long way, and being transparent and making sure that you just never give up, and you show people you're going to fight for the changes that they want to see, and then flexibility when you can't get everything you want. Sorry, it's a sore subject right now. Thanks.
And I mean, building on that point of never giving up, we are getting light rail to the east side because Councilmember Balducci did not give up.
Thank you.
Like, truly.
March 28th. Did I say March 28th?
March 28th.
Come out on March 28th.
And how long has the fight been? I'm sorry.
Since at least the early 2000s.
early 2000s. Like that is, I mean, the tenacity to be in the fight for that long, and I think we all know we don't want all fights to be to be that long. However, like the tenacity, the perseverance to make it happen can't be understated. And that's just it. We have to be tenacious and keep moving forward and building that coalition, because we have incredible elected officials who can take up the mantle, and we need more of those folks, and we need a coalition to be working alongside us in order to achieve those wins. And I think about, I mean, truly on the city level now, being on my second year in office, I want things to move so much faster than they do. If we even just look at our sidewalk network within Seattle, it was estimated about last year that at our current pace of building sidewalks, we would sidewalk the whole city in about 400 years, which is pretty daunting when you think about it. But that data point helped inform the advocacy around the Seattle, Keep Seattle Moving levy, and now we've upped our pace of building more sidewalks. So that, as one point, we're making progress. I don't know how many years it's going to take us, but it should be a little bit quicker than 400 years. And these are things where things do take time, and that can be really frustrating as a policymaker, candidly. And we have to keep the focus and attention on these issues. We have to have the coalition that's really demanding the investments that we all know that we need. And we do need to find space to celebrate the wins, which is why we're all going to be at the East Lake March 28th to celebrate that incredible win for our community. And we're going to show up for new bike lanes that are opening. Those little things matter, and using things matter, and demonstrating also to the public that these investments have a meaningful impact on folks' everyday lives, and really keeping up that momentum. I do want to use my final bit of time to uplift one measure that the Seattle City Council is going to be taking up this year, and that's the Seattle Transit Measure. What is the Seattle Transit Measure? And I'm bringing this up because I want everybody here to be engaged on it as we're forming it. This is one that's a little bit less to do with the infrastructure standpoint, but we're talking about Seattle buying bus service and making our transit system accessible. This is what we use to fund extra hours of bus service on our equity priority line, so we can have more late night service, so folks who may be working downtown doing important serving jobs are able to get home at night. And we also fund the Orca Lift program using the Seattle Transit Measure dollars, and reduce bus fare, and so much more. And so this is a really important matter that Seattle is going to be taking up this year, more in just the service realm. We would love to see a coalition of folks engaged on it, because it is tremendously important when we're talking about getting folks onto buses safely. And so I wanted to at least lift that up for this discussion, that really welcome your engagement on that topic, and as we shape up what that measure looks like for the year. Thank you.
Love that. Awesome. My kind of big closing thought here as we close out is keep your North Star close. Like, remember what we're fighting for, because I think there is a lot of discouragement along the path, and we know that. There also is a lot of progress when you know what you're aiming for, but just like sailors of yesteryear, you got to be able to tack the sails and look for opportunities as they emerge, and then stay off the shoals. Don't crash the boat, keep it afloat here. Part of this belabored maritime metaphor is, for me, I grew up on Bainbridge Island over on Kitsap, and for me it's a lot about how do we get fast ferries, connected communities, and safe streets. That's my North Star. And I know as a relatively junior person on the House Transportation Committee, part of serving the legislature, you got to put in some time. You have to deliver some wins to show colleagues you're worthy of greater responsibility. And it's the same thing when we're putting together a coalition, we're trying to go to bat. We've got to remember, too, that we have agencies and staff that actually care deeply. They're devoting their entire career to this. Folks like Steve Nevy, who leads the ferries and is trying to rebuild the ferry fleet. Individuals like Barb Chamberlain, who is so active and engaged and cares enough to be here with us today. I love seeing you here, Barb. And when we've got our North Star, there are folks that care deeply, and so keep spreading the word, stay agile as we go. My final remark here, my shameless plug, I told you I'm actually driving down to Olympia right after this. Mosquito Fleet Act is going to the Senate. Last year, Councilmember Mercedes Rinck helped us get across the line in the House. We stalled out in the Senate. I need your help. If you want to add your voice to the legislative record, you can sign in pro on House Bill 1923. Would love your help by signing in pro. And I'd love your help to get this across the line this year. Thank you.
So I'll apologize that we have actually run out of time. I don't want to. Do we have time for one question? Is that all right? Is that okay?
Yes. Okay, great. Joe Kunzer here. I'm going to be very quick. Representative Nance, considering next Thursday I'm going to have to take the bus at least from Sound Transit headquarters to your wonderful state legislature and have to go through all the challenges of taking one bus from Seattle to Lakewood, run across the street to Wendy's to go to the bathroom and grab something to eat, and take another bus to get to Olympia. When will you also take the same challenge, please? Thank you.
Count me in. So I grew up riding Kitsap Transit, and I'm blessed that growing up in a rural community, we had that. I then spent 4 years in Chicago for school, a year in England for business school, and I lived in Shanghai for 7 years. And those are places that have, one of those has excellent bus and train service. One of them was actively building out an amazing, massive footprint in Shanghai. And then one of them had privatized service, England. And paying 50 quid to ride a train anywhere when you're on a student's budget, completely untenable. So I will take up the mantle. I'm looking forward to doing the Week Without Driving once again. Because, yeah, we need to feel that pain. And that's part of the spirit of what I work on. How do we make Washington work for everyone?
Good night. Joe's question also raised a separate issue that I'm not sure you intended to raise, but I'm going to pick up on it anyway. Access to restrooms is an access issue. We have got to do better because people who ride the system need to be able to go to the bathroom. I mean, and so that is something that I want to raise, and I will say that our Seattle and other representatives are raising at Sound Transit, particularly where we have capital money, to do a better job of making sure people have access to basic conveniences when they ride the system.
I want to chime in on this point. Thank you for that. Bathrooms are so important. I used to, when I lived in the U District grad student, and the only place I could get an internship was at the city of Lakewood, and I didn't have a car. And so I used to take the 62 Express to get to downtown, and then I would hop on the 594 if that was coming, whichever, there's a couple of 500 buses that go down that way. It really depended on timing. And I can't tell you how many hours I've spent at the Federal Way Transit Center pacing. And I would just hope, especially on the way back home, I would just hope I had enough juice in my phone to get me through. But there were times where I was just standing there in the cold, freezing, unsure when the next bus was coming. That is an experience that I live with all the time. I reflect on when we're talking about folks who literally need buses, especially transfers, to come on time. It is a livelihood issue. It's something that still haunts me and informs a lot of my decision making, because those were a rough 6 months when I was spending about 3.5 hours of my day on maybe a good day just trying to get down to Lakewood to do an internship that I needed to do to graduate from my program, making $15 an hour. That experience does not leave me, and needs to inform also how, it really does inform how I look at how we're thinking about a regional transit network that meets people's needs and gets them where they need to go.
Please let us thank our plenary panel session. I am just so mesmerized with your tenacity, with your continuing investment in connecting people and places. And thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.